Hey everyone, it's Mark Zielinski. How are you? And it is time for Pannilore. And of course, I am here with Wiki Dave. How's it going, Wiki Dave?
I'm doing fine. My brain's a bit fried from all the lore content that's been dumped on us over the last couple of weeks, but now we're gonna actually get to analyze a little bit of it as we go through some of these stories.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're busily chasing down all sorts of fragments of information across the interwebs, but going to the lore, it's all sitting there right on the Mantic website, which is fantastic. So far, what I think 9 stories have been released, Dave, something like that.
As of right
So
now, and we put
as
we
of
should
today's
state the date.
recording,
Yeah, we should state the date when we're recording this because by the time it actually comes out, there'll probably be something because that's how Mantic do it. We record and then they release something. Halo podcast listeners will experience that quite a lot. So yeah, at the moment it's the 16th of November as we're recording this, and we've had 9 stories come out. We're only going to review the first 5 because we're going to do it in batches. We'll do the first 5 here, and we're assuming they're going to release another one to make up 10. And we'll do the second batch later on, and then a big old summary of all that lore. And there are some interesting talking points when it comes to these short stories, and it's probably the biggest batch of short stories they've dumped for a very long time. I've been cataloging a lot of them on the wiki, and yeah, there's definitely a lot around now than we've had previously. So it's really cool to dissect them a little bit.
oh yeah, and they're good. So some better than others. So, but
Yeah,
I'm enjoying the second batch. I think that those have been really good. So, and you and I
yeah.
have been discussing these for a little bit. So that's why we decided to get together and discuss them with all the, nice listeners out there in MUP land. So
Yeah.
we can
We'll actually put
check
our
them out.
thoughts down on paper. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so we're going to go through the first 5 stories. So to list them here, and we'll do them in order as well. We've got Out of Control, which is by Matt Gilbert. Rage by Matt Gilbert. The Traveler, which is by Dan Mapleston. Argon's Luck, which is by Matt Gilbert. And Planestalker, which is also by Matt Gilbert. Matt Gilbert's been very busy because he did some of the second batch as well. So I don't
Yes,
know
he
how he's
did.
got all the time, but you can definitely tell he's got a lot of passion for storytelling. So there's probably a lot of extra hours put in there that he probably didn't get paid for. So it's
Well,
all
he is the
definitely
Lord
appreciated.
Master at Mantic, so he is the
He is
man.
the Lore Master. Yeah,
Yep.
and he probably hates me by all the questions I ask him sometimes. I reached out to him because I'm been cataloging a lot of the Dungeon Saga characters for the wiki, and there's a lot of Kickstarter ones that were kind of like dropped but kind of forgotten. And I reached out to him, and he was more than happy to help me out of cataloging some of them and put a character on called, I think it was Samuel L. Jackingson, and he was a Kickstarter character who's actually based off Samuel L. Jackson, the actor. And that's that halfling that has a little cigar, and he's got a little crossbow as well. And he's got a wealth of knowledge. That man, he can't remember everything, but I would like to dig into his brain once in a while and harass him. So he's probably sick of my voice, but he's definitely the reason why we have what we have in front of us.
Absolutely. You'll find Night Stalkers in there, so beware.
Yes. All right. So we're going to make this a little bit fun. So we're going to read out all the stories, a bit of a summary. Obviously, there's going to be some nuance and little subtle details that will be missed in the summary. So we do stress, and the links will be in the descriptions below, regardless of which platform you're listening to this on. Read the stories. They're not long because they're short stories, but they definitely have a lot of heart put into them. And you may pick up on something that these summaries don't actually disclose. And this is our interpretation. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the correct interpretation. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the right interpretation. It is just our interpretation, as all media is subjective. And whether you like it, you don't like it, read it for yourself and then make a call. The idea of this is so we can just state what it is and then have a little discussion about what's the intent. And we're going to actually have a game, which I just sprung on Mark before we push record. It's called What Was the Point? So after every story, I'm going to pose to Mark, what was the point of the story? And then we're going to have to talk about what was the point. Because some of them end a little bit abruptly. And on face value, it feels like, what was the point in that? and we're going to actually dive a little deeper of how that relates to specifically 4th edition, because this is all a road to 4th edition kind of story. But ultimately, that's how we're going to make this a little bit fun. And there's one story that goes on for a very long time, which I might stumble through or run out of breath with. So I might end up getting halfway through and then just summarizing the rest in like one sentence. We'll see.
Yes,
we'll see
is.
how we go.
One definitely runs longer than the others, no doubt about it.
You'll understand when we get to it, obviously. But I guess before we dive into it, and you don't need to elaborate why, we can elaborate it when we get to it. Which one out of these first 5 for you, Mark, is your favorite?
Oh boy. Well,
you don't need to elaborate. We can elaborate when we get to it, but just on the surface,
it's a tie.
Yeah, it's a tie between which ones?
It's a tie. The Traveler and Argon's Luck. Argon's Luck doesn't win outright because it's, well, I'll spoil it now, the longest. So, but
there you go.
So, yeah. So, but yeah, I really, those were the 2. And if I had to pick one, I'd go with Argon's Luck. So,
I would pick the Traveler. I would pick the Traveler, but I would say second place, surprisingly, is Planestalker.
Really?
Mainly because of when it was revealed and what it revealed, which is unlike the stories we've had before. And I will explain that when we get to it, of why I like it. I think in hindsight, if you were to combine every story Mantic has ever put out in the past and future, it's not going to hold up. But I think right now in this time and space, it does. And I'll explain why once we get to it.
There you go. That's what's the point. Sounds good.
That's what's the point. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that one. It was very interesting, and it had characters in it that I really, I don't want to say relate to, but I'm really interested in. And so, but it was also really short. But so we'll play our game when we get to that one.
Exactly. So we'll start with Out of Control. All right. So I'm going to summarize this the best I can. Everything I'm about to say is typed up on the wiki, so you can go and check it out for yourself. But this story takes place in 3868. Golek Skinflayer was leading a small army of Ratkin slaves against the Basilean forces, along with a greater Abyssal Dwarfs army. Golek watched as his vermin that he had promised Overmaster Birkham would perform well, fall, and die. Golek ordered his tunnel runners to be released. However, instead of plowing into the Basileans, they instead took out some Ratmen along with some Black Souls. Next up, he released his Dungeon Engine Spewer that he commanded, which managed to fire its rattle cannon successfully into the ranks of the Basileans before hitting a trench, tipping over, and then killing the crew. After the failures, Golek finally mounted his chariot and rode into battle. And that's the end of that. Now, we'll go for a little bit of trivia. I'll call it Golek trivia. This story actually includes a Death Engine Spewer, which is actually a Ratkin faction unit in 3rd edition, being commanded by Golek Skinflayer, who is a Ratkin slave's hero. Only the Ratkin Engine Impaler is actually available to the Ratkin slave factions. So the fact that it had cannons on it, actually only Ratkins can actually have that. So whether that means in 4th edition that's now going to be a unit that's available to Golek or not, that was something I actually noticed, because they shouldn't have cannons on it based off what 3rd edition has available to them. That's just me being nitty gritty, like me being like pedantic about stuff. But anyway, that's what I noticed.
Yeah, I had the same thought about the tunnel runners. Are the tunnel runners in the Ratkin slave army? I don't remember them in there. Not that
I believe they are.
I
think the names like Ratkins or slave tunnel runners or something like that. I know they have I'm pretty sure tunnel runners are on the Ratkin slaves. I'm subtly
okay. Yeah, I'll have to go look. I only have an ambush army of Ratkin slaves. So.
I'm going to have to check. I have to double check that, but we'll go through the rest of the trivia. This is the second story about the Ratkin slaves faction, as I put the first story being Honest Price. I think Honest Price is a Ratkin faction story, and we did confirm that with Mike Rossi at the time when we did, I think, a Countercharge episode about it. This is the first canon story So first story in canon about Golik's Skinflayer. We knew about Golik's Skinflayer as a hero, but this is the first time we've actually got a story about it, which is cool. And also, this is the same year as the Riftforge Orcs invasion of the Shires. And at the time, it was the most recent date we had on the timeline. We actually haven't had any stories when this first came out of what happened after it, other than Shadow Horizons, but it's never really stated when that actually takes place. Shadow Horizons, it sounds like, based off how everything's been set up, to have taken place before the Riftforge Orcs attacked and before the invasion of the Zerkali Empire, but that's only a 2-year gap. So it either took place, the Shadow Horizons either took place the year after, or it only really can take place the year after in 3869. But also, it would mean that the Deepwater Crusade had to take place in the same year. So it's very messy about what actually takes place in that 1-year gap between the invasion of Zerkali and the Shire invasion. But yeah, that's my trivia for this particular story. Do you have anything else that you noticed, Mark, from the story before we dive into what was the point?
Well, my summary of the story is a little different than yours. It's just crank, 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 scream. So
yeah, pretty much.
Story.
That's the too long didn't read version.
There you go. So that's my short little summary of it. But go ahead and read the story. It's actually pretty good. So
yeah, definitely read the story. It points out a few things which will make more sense as we go through this next bit. But yeah, slave tunnel runners are available to the Ratkin slaves. So yeah, they do have
very nice
tunnel runners available to them. So Mark, we'll start off with, what was the point? So what was, from your perception, what was the point of the story?
To me, the point of the story is showing that we have combined army lists. So Ratkin slaves are part of the Abyssal Dwarf army list. And so to me, that when I finished the story, that's what I was thinking about, believe it or not. So
yeah, that's my perception as well, is that this is trying to show that you can now get units that aren't currently available for Ratkin slaves inside a Ratkin slave army, but it is also combined with the Abyssal Dwarfs army, which is why they're fighting on the same side combined together. So that was my interpretation, and the fact that these units are only available to Golik. You have to I haven't seen the Ratkin list. I don't think I've listened to a podcast about the Ratkins list at the moment, but from what it sounds like, you have to select Golik in order to have these units available to you. So I think this is this is their narrative way of it kind of showing that. I don't like this idea, but this is the why they're going this direction. But also, this is the story reason why. I mean, Ratkin slaves is one of those ones that narratively they haven't been given. Ratkin slaves haven't been given a unique enough feel that the separation is too weird. This is not like a very strange pairing, combining these and treating them this way, just because Ratkin slave doesn't really have a lot of that. It's not like free dwarfs that have like a distinct personality away from dwarfs. Free dwarfs and dwarfs are very, very different in terms of who they are in personality and culture wise. Ratkin slaves and Abyssal dwarfs, the only difference is Ratkin slaves, their masters are just like more crazy abyssal dwarfs that like to do experiments. That's pretty much the only difference really between the two.
Right.
But yeah,
I'm just wondering how my ambush army list is going to be tweaked out for the Ratkin slaves. So is Golik got to show up in every army? So
that's
we'll have to see. And I don't know if he's a warlord, and if he's a warlord, warlords can't be an ambush army. So if he's a
it's
warlord,
confusing.
That would be a problem. So
yeah, and I think that's one of the issues, and this is more us being critiquing. We're obviously fans of Mantic's, why we do this podcast, but the uncertainty of how factions can still play in 4th edition, that noise has got very, very loud to a point. Everyone's very confused of whether their faction, which is vanishing or supposedly vanishing, if they can still do it or not. I mean, everyone assumed Ratkin slave wouldn't be a faction in 4th edition. I think that was a big conversation piece. But it's sounding like it can still be a faction in 4th edition now. So, I mean, everyone's kind of zigzagging. I mean, I was part of this is another point that I'm trying to make with confusion around factions, the Herd Facebook group recently renamed themselves to the Zakali Empire
Yes, I
Facebook
saw
group.
that.
Yeah,
That's
and I
crazy.
was just like, what? Was it confirmed that the Herd is vanishing? It's confirmed that the Herd is. I don't even know if it's confirmed. There's nothing official on their website, but it's said that the Herd is merging into the forces of the Nature List, and if is the option for it to be a subfaction the same way Rat Slave, is that still going to be a thing? Is there a hero that you can pick that will allow those? I don't know. This is the problem. Everyone is very confused about how this is working. The story, I think, was trying to point out kind of how it was working. You have to pick this hero in order to get these units unlocked for it. But I feel like that was the point of this particular story before we really knew it, because this was, I think this came out on the 30th of September. So this was fairly early on in the release strategy.
Right. And I heard that it sounds like Forces of Nature are going to be the lead army in the next book. So
that's the rumor. Again, we don't know, and I think that would be something that, Mantic, if you're listening and haven't done it yet, I think now's probably a good time just to bring out an article to say which factions are staying around, which ones aren't, which ones are going to be released when, and what's the strategy going forward, because there's so many people that have rumors, that sharing rumors, blah, blah, blah. There's nothing wrong with telling us what's going, the roadmap. Essentially, that's all we're asking for, is a bit of a roadmap of what's next and what can we expect, because I've actually seen a couple of comments of people not wanting to invest money into their armies because they don't know if it's going to exist next year. So for Christmas, do they, buy certain armies for the loved ones that do follow Kings of War? I don't know if they have any, but you get my point. It's a little bit of a very confusing field at the moment, and I think these stories are a good example of what potentially is probably happening, but we still don't know. So,
right.
All right. So, any last comments about Out of Control?
No. It was a good opening salvo. So.
Yeah, so it's a good first shot, and it was really cool to see a story about a character that has been in the game for a while, that you can play on the table, but hasn't had a story about them yet. And this was a good feel of that finally for Golic, and hopefully we see some more. Yeah, sounds like he's sticking around for 4th edition, so we might get some more stories there.
Absolutely, I was really surprised to see him lead with the Rat Slaves after all the crap they've gotten basically on the 4th edition ramp up. It's the joke army Ronnie likes to tease about in his interviews and stuff like that. So I was surprised to see him lead with that.
To be honest, I think it was a good idea. Good idea, leading with something people didn't expect to show. I mean, I think the clear message is Rat Slaves is still an option in 4th edition, because this is called the Road to 4th edition. So you wouldn't have a story about a faction that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
You have Road to 4th edition. You have kind of explained kind of that it's still around, and kind of hinted to how you could do it. And so it was actually a good, when you start to narrate, we start to analyze it, overanalyze it, of that. Whether that point got across to everyone that read the story, I'm not sure. But that's what I feel like, why they did what they did.
All right. So what's up next, Dave?
All right. Next up, we got Rage, again by Matt Gilbert. So I'm going to try and do my best reading this out. This one's a little bit longer. In 3851, during the Edge of the Abyss events, Direfang rider Rulik, on top of Drumvac, which is his Direfang, watched as the Vanguard fought against the forces of the Abyss, including units such as Sons of Korgon, which were Hearthguard from Eurusfakal. God, I'm butchering these names.
You're a brave man, Dave.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I'm sorry, everybody. Cavern Dwellers, Half Elf Berserkers, Ice Elementals, and Night Raiders. The Hearthguard from Yusufgal were battling through lower abyssals and succubi in order to challenge the abyssal berserkers. Tundra wolves, snow foxes, and cavern dwellers attacked the Nagari on the side, and Fricka, the leader of the Night Riders, fired at the incoming flame bearers, who fired back at them. Fricka's group fell back and was replaced by Korvik the Mad, leading a pack of exiled half-elf berserkers who originated from Leith, so it means they're Twilightkin. Ice elementals summoned by Magus Yursuffer Stormveld fired ice shards into the hellhounds in front of them. I'm not wording this very well because I'm kind of reading it and realize that my typing is horrible, so I apologize.
There you go. Now you're coming to the best part.
Yeah, Gorfractal, Golfalexidol.
Let's call him Gore.
Gore, yeah, okay, Gore, an archfiend of the Abyss and former Jabberwock, who had defected to the forces of the Abyss, revealed himself on the battlefield. Yorick locked eyes with Gore and then charged towards him on top of Drumsvac, meeting whatever fate awaited them. So I'm sorry for that butchery, but if you want to read it, just click the link below. But basically, Yorick was on the battlefield. They were fighting the forces of the Abyss, and then he saw the Archfiend and then charged towards him. That's basically what happened there. Some trivia to come out of that. It was the first known instances where the Vanguard had elves, including the Twilightkin and half-elves, fighting with them previously. And this is I would rate the story a little bit lower because it ruins the idea of this xenophobic kind of faction that the Vanguard were, that they're working with half-elves and elves in general. Because the elves are all about the Shining Ones. They all love the Wicked Ones and the Shining Ones, and now they've allied with them feels a little bit off. And it was during the Edge of the Abyss. So you could justifiably say the reason why the Vanguard sided with these elves and included them in their force was because of the forces of the Edge of the Abyss incident. When the forces of the Abyss were invading, they needed extra help, so they got Twilightkin to come and help them. You could explain it that way, but it kind of ruins the faction a little bit to include non-humans fighting on the battlefield. But that's just my feelings on that. They were all new characters, which is really cool. So all the characters that they are butchered and mentioned, the first time we've ever seen them. But it's also noted that Jabberwocks, turns out they can become archfiends. I think that's something that we didn't know previously. Jabberwocks, we haven't really had a model for them, but we've always seen that name, Jabberwock, kind of thrown in lore before. But the fact that they can choose to exile themselves and side with the forces of Abyss and become an archfiend is actually quite interesting. So before we go into what's the point, Mark, did you want to do your summary there? Because it's probably a lot better than me butchering everything.
No, you did a great summary. For me, there were just some things I picked out of the story that I thought were very, very interesting. So especially our buddy Gore. I have not listened to the Countercharge episode, going over the Forces of the Abyss list. But man, I hope Gore is a special character in there. So he's a fusion of two types of creatures, and which are very important to the Varangur. So I thought he was a perfect bad guy to kind of throw in there and have him fight. But this just reminded me of a big fight scene from a novel. So it's just
which novel?
That type of thing. So just any novel,
just any novel.
Yeah, just any big battle scene in a novel, I mean, so, people love those. So from that standpoint, it's really cool. So I also found it interesting with them talking about how the Abyss was, dissipating. The bodies of the Abyss would, dissipate from the battlefield overnight and stuff like that. So, but, I don't want to spoil the rest of the story. So please go read it.
Oh, no. We're reviewing it, so I guess we can say that. I mean, they have stressed the point. I mean, I think we've got the rules of the Abyss a little bit more concrete now to know that if you kill an Abyss, they're not dead if you kill them on the surface of the mortal realms. They essentially just get reborn. And I think Mark Barber does a good job in Steps of Deliverance and and Faith Aligned, of the succubi who dies in the Steps of Deliverance being reborn in the way she is in the Abyss. So I think this is just further kind of concreting just the behavior of how demons and the force of the abyss kind of work, and the symbiotic kind of, not symbiotic relationship, but just the relationship they have against the mortal realm. You kill one, they just get reborn, a little bit weaker, a little bit more on the back step, but the time works differently down below. I think I do like that consistency. I think that's really good to establish how that kind of works. But I guess we'll go strictly into the fun point of what was the point, Mark? What was the
For
point of the
me,
story?
the point is that the Northern Alliance and the Varangerlists are combined, and that is because you've got units from both of them fighting in the battle, and so that's what I thought the point was. So when
Correct.
I got to the end of the story,
Yeah, I felt the exact same way, which kind of bothered me. And I get it from a gameplay point of view. I'm just strictly talking from how my interpretation of the Vargar were that they were this old blood, old god following unit that just didn't like the ones that followed the shining ones and the ones that followed the wicked ones, because they just hate all Celestians. It's why they sided with the forces of good during the Edge of the Abyss campaign, because they just absolutely hate the shining ones. Oh, sorry, the wicked ones. So they don't want the wicked ones to take over. And also there's a really good other short story that's in the Edge of the Abyss book, Crimson Winter, where there's actually a Vargar that secretly joins the Northern Alliance, and he ends up siding with them, fighting the forces of the Abyss, only to turn on the Northern Alliance when they figure out that the secret that Pannilore is hiding, which is now hinted towards, that's going to be a shining one, which makes sense why the Vargar don't like them either, because they're hiding a shining one. So I don't like that breaking away from it. Now, the Twilight Kin, it specifically mentioned the Twilight Kin being there, which they're very void heavy. They're less about the Abyss. They're more kind of followers of the void, which aren't the Celestians. They're kind of the enemy of the Celestians, really what comes from the void. However, they do still have abyssal ties. So I don't, and it does mention half elves and also Mangus Yasfield or Stormfield, which is, it sounds like that's an ice queen, so she's got ice magic. It's, I don't know, I feel like it kind of breaks a little bit of that lore, but again, I can forgive it considering the year it takes place. It took place in 3851, which is during the Edge of the Abyss campaign. So the Edge of the Abyss takes place from 3850 to 3854. So this is during that war. So you could reasonably say, hey, the Vargar was helping out. They took some more forces in to help them fight back the Abyss just for this period of time, so it doesn't really break too much of the lore historically or in the future. But that's just me trying to make the story work with my own interpretation of the Vargar. I don't know. What do you feel about that, Mark?
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, you've got me looking at dates, Dave. So I blame
dates
you.
are important. I think for evolution of anything, even humanity, we always look at dates of when certain things happen, and it's why we keep dates. It's just so we know. And I think dates are quite important especially when you're looking at a fantasy world and wanting to build legacy characters and history and all that. You can't have history without dates. Otherwise, it's just things that happened. But and I didn't like the story because of what it potentially broke. But if there is some logical explanation that we don't know, that because we don't have that context yet, it seems a bit off, I'll be okay with it. But that's just one thing that bothered me, of like it felt like the story was more to make the game make sense rather than the lore, if that makes sense.
Well, makes sense to me. So all right. But yeah, folks, definitely go check it out. You know, I mean,
yeah,
all the stories are good. So
yeah, at the end of the day, it's your own interpretation. It's subjective, all that stuff. This is just our quick breakdown, and we're not going to do it justice, as you tell by the way I repeat back the story. So just
there you go.
Just take your own interpretation for it. So,
and if you've got something or you think we're wrong, please put it in the comments below. So
definitely we'll address it
with you.
Yeah, and we want to address a lot more common questions as well. So if you've got a question, pop it down below in YouTube or in Spotify. We'll address it on the second episode of our, and we want more of a discussion here. I mean, I'm excited about the lore, but it's more exciting if other people are more engaged with it than I am and telling me what's up and correcting me. That I enjoy that a lot more. All right,
There you
we'll
go.
move on to The Traveler, and this one's by Dan Mapleston, which for people that follow Mantic will know of Dan's name. Oh, what's his official role? I don't remember.
He's kind of doing marketing since
Communications, I think, is it?
So marketing,
Yeah, something like
communications,
that.
yeah. So Dan's a great guy, though.
Yeah.
With him quite a bit at Clash of Kings UK this year, and no, top-notch guy, man, all the way. So Mantic's very lucky to have him. So
yeah, I've only ever really had good stories from the majority of people that work at Mantic. So I mean, Dan, I think he came on one of the Mantic podcasts ages ago when we were talking about Halo, I think it was, or maybe it was a different one. I don't know, but either way, yeah, Dan's great. I think it was
top
Halo.
shelf.
I want to say Halo. Yeah. Cool. All right, so we're going to be talking about The Traveler. So this is my favorite, my personal favorite. So this takes place in 3870. Alana Stannis, from those that have been paying attention, that is from Champions. Alana Stannis was traveling through the trading town of Dar Issa in Iskar with a Basilian force. An old yarn traveler was traveling through the town market, as it was market day, and handed a small carved stone disc to a young girl behind a jewelry stall, then moved on. Shortly after, Alanis's men-at-arms took the traveler prisoner. However, when the traveler looked back at the young girl, she was gone, much to his relief. The Basilians took the prisoner to a nearby tavern and down to the cellar, bounding him to a wooden chair and leaving him alone. Alanis then arrived with a war wizard and pulled a stone fragment with part of a carved symbol in it from her pocket. Alanis then began to interrogate the prisoner for information on the symbol, as she had heard the prisoner had information on it. After seeing seeing through the prisoner's lies, Alanis exposed the prisoner to its recent movements on sketching the town layouts and defensive lines. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. Alanis exposed the prisoner to his recent movements on sketching out the town layouts and the defensive lines. The prisoner then revealed that they had. Oh wait. The prisoner then revealed that they break the tablets when their task is complete, and if they are compromised, we pass it on to another to act in their place. Sorry. They basically break the tablets that they have, and then they pass it on to another if they were to take the place of the task that they were assigned to. The prisoner went on to reveal it was them who was being hunted, and it had already begun. The prisoner's masters had offered the elders of Dar Issa 3 chances to comply, and what would happen if they did not. The elders of Dar Issa didn't want to accept the reality of what was happening and ignored the threat that they were given. As the prisoner explained, the ground began to shake and the bottles of the cellar began to rattle. Sounds of screams and inhuman growls started happening from upstairs. The prisoner advised they were out of time, and Alanis released the prisoner in hopes it would buy them time to escape. Alanis, the war wizard, and the prisoner quickly climbed out of the cellar, and that was it over. I did butcher that. I do apologize. If you want to read it, it's in the link below.
It's kind of the point. Read the story, but yes.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway,
a little summary of it. So
yeah, we'll go through the trivia. This was actually the first mention of the yarn, which at the time we didn't know who the yarn were, but it was later revealed that was the human name. That was the name for the humans that were part of the Zerkali Empire. This was the earliest date at the time that we have ever been given, and that's 3,870. That was the earliest on record. This was the first story outside of the Champions book we actually had about a champion that was featured in Champions. It also helped us date when the story of Champions actually took place, which looks like it's around this time as well, depending on whether the big mystery of them heading all up north has already occurred or it's about to occur. essentially it's around 3,870. And it sounds like this is the start of the Zerkali invasion to the east. So we know that the book Stand of Kallenspire is going to be coming out soon, and that actually takes place more to the west of where we are and down south a little bit. So we've got that invasion happening, and then we've also got this invasion to the east. So that's two battlegrounds that we could say is happening there. And yeah, that's the trivia I have there. So I'll chuck it to you, Mark. What's your summary of the story there?
Well, I'm not going to give so much the summary because I think you did that, but I just found it interesting. I've got saved some of this for what's the point, but I just found it very interesting. The Basileans, they just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And there is the way they get interpreted by people. That really reached out to me. And then, I blew past it that, there was the Jan in there earlier on. But as you mentioned, it's the first time that it's mentioned. And that didn't really hit you until several days later. You're like, oh, okay. It's like when you read a story and you go into blah, blah, blah mode. It's like, okay, blah, 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 Jan, okay. Well, we'll figure that out later.
Yeah, when Jan was dumped, I was just like, is this a reference people should know? I think I asked on one of the Facebook groups, like, does anyone know what Jan was? Maybe it was a unit, a race, something I have missed. But then it was explained later on. It makes sense. But just at the time, it was very kind of like, wait, what? What's a Jan? Like, it didn't really. I think how it's worded didn't really state they were human when it said the Jan as well, and then you kind of worked it out as the story continued. And it makes sense in the context of what Jan is, of why they would be around this area as well. I think if we bring up a quick map, which I've got
through the magic of
for the magic of me removing this image and putting it up, and audio listeners would be very confused. So if you look at this map of once it loads, what we're talking about is actually up here. It is right here. Darius is right here. This is my map I'm trying to stitch together, but it's in Istakar. So if you think about where the Harpy Mountains are, for those that are listening, think of it east of there. There's a big water spot in the middle, high sea of Bahari. Past that, and you keep going east, and that's where you get Darius. So Darius is a little bit more, in the middle of the world, but to the east. And just for the context for a story that we're going to be going over later, which is Pathstalker, that takes place down here to the south in the ruins of Hawthorne. So it looks like we've got a battlefield up here. So we've got a battlefield I shouldn't say up here, to explain it. We've got one to the east, to the upper east of the world. We've got one to the lower east. And then if we go right over to the west side of it, where Eldenholm is, because that's where Kallenspire is. Kallenspire is kind of down to the southeast of the map as well. So this is the third area of attack. And if memory serves me right, we've got 4 claws or 5 claws that the Zerkali has kind of mustered?
Yeah, 5 claws, I think it was. Yeah.
I think it's like 4 or 5, but at least...
one's going to be like an armada fleet, I think. So
yeah, something like that. So
there were 3 claws that were coming across the land, if I recall correctly. So, but that's something like that. But where they land in their places of attack, we know that they're going north, right? We know they're going north, so they're probably going to chill. And because that's where Champions is kind of hinted towards that, and there's a reason why the logo of the Zerkali was included in all the Champion companies, right? That's the Zerkali logo, and it all hints that everyone has been moving towards chill because Talon has got the secret up there. So it feels like that's one of the armies are going to go there, but they also have hinted the rift. The Harpy's Rift would be an area of attack as well. So if they've got 5, there's going to be one down here. So when I say one down here, I mean to the southwest. I'm trying to get my directions right. Southwest,
And then to the east, you've got the upper east, you got one. Whether the lower east as well, that's 2, or maybe that's 1, just doing the upper and lower. But I think that's 2. There'll be one army down here, or 1 out to the lower east, and then 1 army to the upper east, and then maybe another one to the Harpy Mountains and another one to Chill. So that's my 5. That's where I think all 5 of them are landing. We obviously don't know. This is just us guessing, but they clearly want to go to Chill to stop whatever's there. Whether it's bad or good, it's kind of vague. You'll think Talon is on the side of good, so you think it would be a good reason, but that's my guess of what's happening there. So we'll dive into the next bit. Is what's the point? What's the point of the story, Mark?
Well, I think one of the points was introducing the Yan and the concept of what's going on, and the story makes more sense once you get more context for it. So from that standpoint, so I think that was it. It was kind of introduced the new faction, and I think that it's like, well, we asked 3 times. The other thing is it provides the tie-in with 4th edition to Champions, because all the champions are supposed to be available in 4th edition. And it was a cute little tie-in with the little MDF pieces we got in Champions, and put them like actually into the lore, and they had a real purpose for being there. Now, if you didn't play Champions and you lived under a rock and you didn't hear about all the little MDF pieces, that probably wouldn't have struck you. But that's definitely, from me, what the point was. How about you, Dave? What'd you think?
I think you're exactly right. I think the point was to introduce Zakali. Now, when you read this after knowing who the Zakali was, you think they're being way too more vague than they should be, because of the subtle, because they mentioned the growling, all that kind of stuff. Out of context, that doesn't really make sense. If you already know what the Zakali are, which are the humanoid dogs, you're like, oh, that's them. Why aren't they just saying that? Or why aren't they just showing this? Because at the time we didn't know that. That was all new and fresh. So I think that was the whole point of it. I think, again, to go into your point, it was definitely to show Champions is in this world. It is part of the story. I do think this is also their way of showing that the Champions story and what's happening in Kings of War 4th edition story is happening at the same time. It is a story that's running in parallel with each other, that maybe they don't influence each other, but the story of Champions is definitely affecting, or is definitely happening at the same time as Kings of War, which wasn't never stated in the books of Champions that we got. The time was never given. A timeline was never stated of what was happening. The only thing we really knew is there's something up north that is happening, and that all the heroes seem to be going in that direction. But we had no idea when Axel woke up in his story. We had no idea. Alanis' story, she lost her family around the edge of the abyss, and this takes place in 3,870. So it makes her around about 20 to 30 years old. So she's rather battle hardened as well. At first, I thought she was young. I had this interpretation. She was a young hero.
What I thought she was young too. Yeah.
Yeah, but
her pictures make her look that way.
Yeah, and remember, she technically the Stannis line is half Eli, but half angel basically. But I don't know whether she is part of that half or not. I don't think it's actually stated. But ultimately, it means that she's a little bit more battle hardened, which is quite interesting, and it means she's got a little bit more maturity to it. She's clearly leading this force with a bit of authority there as well. And, but if we go back to the map that we're referring to, she is going to have to travel quite a lot, like to go from where she is in the story to all the way to Chill is quite a long journey. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, whether she goes for a few events and then ends up in there. And also, I should actually mention the ogre hero was mentioned in there as well. In the story, it's not mentioned by name. It mentions an ogre mercenary giving it some information. Whether it was true or not, but it was clearly meant towards. I can't remember her name for the life of me. I can't remember the ogre's character name.
Rockamora or something like that. So
Arakamok is where that's what they call the ogre land.
Right. No, it was like I said, we're butchering the pronunciations here, but
we always
like
butcher it.
Rockamora or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's a Rockamora, actually. Yeah, you're completely right. A Rockamora. Sorry, I must have just been confusing it with its Ogrelands. But either way, she's subtly mentioned there, not by name, but just to mention she exists. So I think it's clearly to say that, these two characters exist at the same time, and they have definitely ties to the Edge of the Abyss as well. So they are aged. They're around about 2030s, and I think it's a really good addition. We haven't really had any more Champions information since this has come out about that story. We know they've got something lined up. We know the next Champions box is most likely Zerkali. But we don't know what's next in the story, and it'll be interesting to see how this all ties together. Hopefully it does. And I will say this now, and I said this to Mark outside of this recording, is that the lore is definitely one of the highlights to this 4th edition rollout. And with Champions, it's all meshing really well, and I'm really liking where it's going. Lore is something that takes a while to sink in. It's not something that, after a year of doing it, everyone's like on board and excited. Typically, this kind of stuff takes a lot of investment, and I'm hoping all this will pay off as the story progresses as we go into 4th edition. So I really like it, and I think it was a really good story. I think I loved it. I loved the surprise, I think, more than anything.
Absolutely. So, but yeah, no, it was fun. Definitely worth the read.
Definitely. All right, we'll jump into the next one, which is Argon's Luck. Now, this is a long story. Now,
yes,
it's a long story. Now, it does take place in 3671. Now, the reason why it takes place there, no idea. It's basically 200 years from any other story we've told so far.
it's a big gap. That's a big gap. So
it's a big gap, and it's around a time where not a lot happened anyway. So it's well after Winter's War. It's well after the Free Dwarfs have made their own home, or kind of like separated from the normal dwarfs. And for context, the Traveler that we just saw, that takes place 3870, and this takes place 3671. So it's 199 years before the events of what we just went over, which is surprising of why they went backwards. Why they did that, no idea. I think I don't really understand that time jump. It could be just the fact of just pick a time, and maybe they wanted to avoid any of that Rift Forge orc kind of issues of them existing in the world, because by that point they would have. This is before the Rift Forge orcs were even thought of in terms of the mortal realm. So now I could go, like, as I was typing this out, I was like, oh, this is a really, really long one. So I'm going to simplify it a lot. And so just bear with me as I go through it. So basically there's an orc called Argon, who's leading a pack of orcs. And they come across essentially some travelers and find a map, and they follow the map into a forest and set up a base camp where they've got a lot of gold and stuff, and essentially are trapping adventurers that come into these woods. Now, if you're going to ask me where this wood is, the Forest of Her, I have no idea. I have no idea where any of these locations that I mentioned in this story are. There's mentions of Harvin Pass, the Bicker Vale, the Yurden Cross, and the Forest of Her. There's Yokeston, which is where the treasure hunters find the map to the location that Argon's warband ends up. I have no idea where this is. So where this takes place, no idea. No idea whatsoever. I'm sure it may be on a bigger map that we haven't seen, but I've scoured the map that you saw earlier, and I cannot find anything there. So, yeah, just assume it happens somewhere in the world. Ultimately, Argon kind of set up a base camp inside of this forest, and they essentially are just trapping adventurers and kind of just having this little hidden fortress inside this forest. Now, eventually, they get attacked by elves, and these elves turned out to be Fae elves. And essentially the Argon goes, hey, all right, take a group of men, go and get these elves and go hunting and kill them and deal with this problem. Those people, those orcs and goblins, and there's orclings as well. I think this is the first instance. Oh no, I did that in trivia one. The orcs go out and they go hunting, but after a while they're not coming back. And Argon's like, what the hell's going on? So he goes out and he finds corpses of his men all over the show. They've been killed and the battles are still taking place. So he goes hunting for this Fae. And he starts fighting with the Fae, and it kind of goes on his journey of finding his men, most of them dead. His little orcling buddy, which is called Spittle, dies unfortunately in one of the battles. And it is noted that he kills a lot of Fae, including a mage queen. He continues to go to fight through until the end. He fights an arch wraith, which is more like an advanced form of Fae, you could say, just like a really powerful Fae. He ends up having a fight, and the last of his men, Meathead, ended up dying as well. And he eventually goes, well, that was, he survives. He's seemingly the last survivor of his warband, and he sees some dice on the ground. He reaches for his dice, accidentally springs one of his traps that his men have sent out. The traps miss him completely, and he ends up, quoting how lucky he is, and he goes away to reform his warband, and that's why essentially it's called Argon's Luck. Now, I summarize that because that's a very, very long story of all that, but we've got mentions of all of his men there, but I've basically, the too long didn't read version, he has a clan, forms it, they end up all dying by Fae, and he leaves. He's the only survivor there. From a trivia point of view, this is the oldest short story / novel outside of Rise of Celestians, and there's a few moments through Thick and Thin as well. That's at the time. One of the newest short stories is actually dated before even Rise of Celestians, which is quite cool. This is the longest short story that we've had so far. I don't know if it's ever. I think it's close to the longest short story ever. This is the first short story to really heavily involve the Fae. The only ever time was inside of Rise of Celestians, and it was very, very brief. The Fae is often seen as a Sylvian kin, kind of like extra Sylvian kin, like just more integrated into the forest and more with nature. But as I mentioned also before, I have no idea where this takes place. No idea. I've looked for the Forest of Ur, can't find it anywhere. And if anyone has any insight, please leave a comment below. But ultimately, that is that story. And I do suggest reading it for yourself. I don't do it any justice because there's a lot of stuff. But ultimately, it's definitely an orc story, which we don't have a lot of them. I think other than Claws of the Plain, I think it's the only other orc story. This is the next best thing. There's my interpretation, Mark.
Very good. Well, I mean, reading this story reminded me of a Dungeons and Dragons story. So that's when I was going through it, it's your typical monsters take over a hold and, fight off the adventurers. That's basically
correct,
it.
Yeah.
So it was good from that standpoint. So it gave me a real Keep on the Borderlands vibe with the D&D. So I enjoyed it. That's probably why it's my favorite. So.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it because the fact that we got things that we hadn't had before. We got orcling names, Spittle, which is kind of implying, and this has been always a debate when I'm going through the lore. Not always a debate, but this is a debate that comes up once in a while. Is what is an orcling? Is it a baby orc, or is it another subspecies of orc, like a snotling from Warhammer? And from goblins have a little bit different. They're called goblins. Are baby goblins, and they grow up and become proper goblins. But orclings have always been on the fence, and the fact that one's actually called Spittle, and it's kind of feeling like it's been around for a while, and you would assume if an orcling was a baby orc, it would breed really quickly because of how orcs were designed. It's making me feel like orclings are actually a race. So it's got little nuggets of cool, interesting, thought-provoking lore hidden in the story, and I like that.
Yep. No, I agree with you. I think orclings are their own thing. So
yeah, I do as well, and I hope they are, because I like this is my headcanon, as they call it. Headcanon is basically you make up canon things in your head that don't not actually true. So my headcanon is secretly there has been an ongoing war between snotlings and gnomes. So gnomes in Kings of War do exist. Gnomes are little grey things that use pickaxes and little tools, and they used to be able to like form into swarms, and they actually were a unit for the forces of nature in first edition. But then they kind of went away. They are briefly mentioned, I think, in Hunters of the Wild or something as a unit where they can be part of that. But they are noted as small grey little things. So my headcanon is that for all this time, there's been an ongoing war between orclings and gnomes that we just don't know about, and that there's a whole other world war going on that we don't know about. But I do hope we see a little bit more of snotlings. Oh, sorry, goblin. I've confused them now. Orclings.
Snotlings, yeah.
Warhammer, yeah, I know. I keep
Orclings.
Orclings.
Yep.
So, Mark, we'll go for the segment. What was the point?
This one I don't know. I
mentioned it in my summary.
Yeah.
I mentioned it in my summary of what the point was. I don't know if you got it, because I made a
go
point
for
to
it. I'm giving you my honest opinion. I got to the end of it and I'm like, wow, it was a great D&D story. Maybe it's tied into Dungeon Saga and Origins, but I don't know. And it's 200 years ahead of everything else. It's like, why is it here? And okay.
Now,
so
on
go
the
ahead.
surface,
It was my favorite, but what's the point?
What's
Enlighten
the
us, Dave.
All right, I don't know for sure. I mean, this is my interpretation. Now, at first, you think it's the point is the orcs, right? There's something to do with the orcs. There's actually got to do with the elves. Now, the Fae is part of the Sylvian elves, right? The Sylvian kin faction. However, they never had the unit currently in 3rd edition of a mage queen. That was exclusively an elf unit. So this story is to indicate, I believe, that the Sylvan kin and the elves emerged the same way the Ratkin slaves were and the Northern Alliance and Vargar were, because Mage Queen is available to them. Archwraith, I think, are Sylvan kin one, but the Mage Queen wasn't, and they specifically mentioned that in the story. So that's what I think the point was.
Okay, I agree with you. Now thinking about it, knowing the story, okay, I got it. But it's 200 years ahead of time. So
I mean, that's what I don't really understand. But it could also, I don't know, maybe it was just a random year he chose, but it also could have been a typo. He could have actually meant it to be an 8 then a 6. So it could be that as well.
Could be. The other point is that the orcs are there, and everybody was speculating that the orcs were going to be gone. So that's kind of my backup on that, is that you've got the orcs that are definitely there and definitely going to be in 4th edition. So
yeah, look, I am a big believer of the Riftforged orcs and the orcs being two separate things. I think the orcs can definitely evolve to be a very unique thing compared to the Riftforged orcs, but I mean, that's a debate for another time. But I just think this particular story was to point out the fact of elves and the Sylvan King are going to be merged together. We don't know for certain. I don't think anyone's done an elf list reading yet, but ultimately that's what I think is happening there, because Sylvan Kin was always a theme list, and it was always a one that seemed like it was going to be merged, but no one ever knew. So yeah, it's good to see, and also probably also confirms that Sylvan Kin are going to be in 4th edition to some capacity, because it seems weird to mention it but not include it. So it's a very long story. I do recommend people look into it and see if my interpretation is correct, because I could be wrong. It could be just a case of pointing out that orcs are going to be in 4th edition, and that's why they did it this way.
Yep. Nope. I think you're right on. So
cool. All right. So
right on. Yeah. Let's get to the last one.
Now we're going to go into the last one, which is Planestalker. Now this one also takes place in 3870, so that's the same time as the Traveler. Now, it's worth noting that this came out after the reveal of Zakali Empire. The Argan's Luck took place, was released before that big reveal. And then I think the next day, that's when the Zakali was released and announced. And I think this was like on the third day of that reveal. So just worth noting that this is going to be the first time we're really diving into anything Zakali outside of those blog posts. So in 3070, Zinzi, Hemion, how do you say that? Hemicron, it's Hemicy-Y-O-N.
Yeah.
What was that?
Hemicyon, I think, something like that.
Hemicyon.
Yeah.
We'll call it Hemi. I'm sorry if that's offensive anywhere, but I'm not sure. I'm just going to call it Hemi for the sake of it. I don't know if Hemi is a derogatory term anywhere. I don't know. I don't know all the terms, so we'll call it Hemi. So Zini was a Hemi from the Zakali Empire who was scouting the ruins of Halathorn, which was currently occupied by the Salamanders. Earlier, Lynchkeg, who was another Hemi scout, had captured one of the Salamander sentries to find out information and learned about Halathorn being reoccupied and fortified. Zini and a force of planestalkers and wild fangs, including Lynching, Hishu, and Jinghora, were planning to sneak behind the Salamanders and ambush their forces when the Salamanders launched their main attack against the Zakali Empire forces, which hopefully results in the taking of Halathorn, which they recently have rebuilt. So a bit of trivia here is and that's it for the story. So we don't actually know if that was successful or not. I'm hoping we'll find it out. This is the first Zakali Empire story we've ever got in terms of a novelization or short story, and we haven't even got the rulebook for them, so it's the first really story of them. It's the first time we've had named Hemis, Hemicons or whatever, which I'm not going to read out again because I butchered them the first time, but it's the first time we're understanding the naming conventions of how this race is actually named. And it's mentioned the reoccupation of Halathorn and a bit of the Salamander Zakali history. So I'm going to quickly show on the map again where this takes place. We showed it a little bit earlier, and that was a little bit ahead of time. But I've realized I've kind of closed the window. But anyway, while I bring that up, Mark, tell us, what did you feel about the story? What do you think?
Well, it was the shortest of all the stories by far. Two basically opening moves, two scouting units, moving around each other. You had one taken prisoner, and the Planestalkers are my favorite unit of the Zerkali. So you can just look at that picture. I don't know, for some reason, I really like the models, and I like the concept of these guys. So I was, happy to read about it, and they lived up to the hype. I mean, they are what I thought they were, and so that was cool. But it was over before it got started almost, because it's really short. So how about you?
Yeah, I've got a feeling we're going to learn more about this story and the outcome of the story later on. I think, this takes place for those that are looking at YouTube. You can see where on the map it is. It's to the lower east of everything, so it's right here, and it's interesting to note that the Salamanders have reoccupied that force. And when you consider where Three Kings is and where they've occupied, they definitely have made a bit of a trek. Three Kings is basically cut off from the water that the Halathorn is actually on. So the Salamanders didn't just sail there because there's a big landmass in the way. So they would have had to march all the way across to reoccupy Halathorn to make an attack or counter-attack against the Zakali. It's not really stated where in the timeline this is. It feels like this is early days, and I don't think this is during the invasion because it seems too far to the east. It feels like the Zakali would have made a lot of ground if it was halfway through this invasion, the story took place. But I do think it's setting up a lot. I think this is one of the stories that feel like we will go back to once we have a little bit more context. But I do like the setting up of history between the salamanders and Zakari, which is pointed out quite often. There is art out there as well of that feud, and it feels like we're looking for more here. So I liked it because it set up so much. It gave us the first instances of how Zakali act towards each other. Didn't see any of that human, Yarn interaction, so we don't really know how that relationship is, because Zakali is a mix of humans and these hemions, so how so how does the hierarchy work? Is it more humans are on the lower side? Is it more equal? Obviously we'll get that a little bit more in the novel of the Sand of Kalinspire, hopefully. But it's interesting seeing how they work. They definitely move as a pack. They're very unified. There isn't kind of a they definitely treat each other with respect. There isn't just like whacking to the side, listen to, isn't any, it seems like it's a more corrective kind of culture, even though the small snippet that we got. But also the naming conventions as well is something that we're going to see more of, because we know that with dwarfs, the Celtic, I think the Celtic or the Welsh, sorry, the Welsh. So we know that's the convention. That's why all the names are Welshish. So we didn't really know which direction they were going to go with this new race. And it's interesting to see the examples starting to pop up of how to name it. And it makes, especially our own story writing, or when people are writing their own fan fiction on the universe, of how to structure that story, because there's going to be a lot of Sakali, hopefully a lot of Sakari stories that come out of this. And it'll be interesting to see what people's interpretations for the names are, because that looks like very Eastern names, Eastern inspired names, and that's why it was my favorite, because it gave us a lot that I was curious about when the Zakali Empire was announced, and it's setting up a lot. And I can't wait. And it's obviously it's the ruins of Halathorn is what it says on the map. Now that they've refortified it, the salamanders, I guess it's not the ruins anymore. So that's a bit of a change on the current map.
Right. Oh, very, very cool.
Yeah. So I think that's all. I guess.
Well, what's the point, Dave?
Yeah. What's the point? I kind of went through some of that. Sorry. I got ahead of myself. Mark, what's the point?
Well, for me, it just introduces and the new units and the new army. So it's just, like you said, it's your first recorded lore, and, these are separate kit. And I think, as you mentioned, those got released to the public. They could see them before the story dropped. Is that true? So if they didn't, the point is to introduce them. And if depending on when the drop was, it's just to show, the models and take them and inject them into the lore and see them move and interact. You know what I mean? So, the other armies, this one you don't know. So, it gives them life.
I'm looking through the story, the reveals there. So, the Zukalis were dropped. So they were revealed on the 10th of October. The pre-order article came out on the 11th of October, and then this story came out on the 13th of October.
Okay.
So it was a couple of days after we were revealed what they were, but also, this art is clearly from probably some of the book art that's probably included. It is, it is the what are they called? Planestalkers, or what?
Planestalkers,
yeah, Planestalkers, yeah. So it is definitely that taken from that unit, and it's definitely a group of them. But I think it also is establishing the relationship that they have with the salamanders a bit more. Yeah, we know that there is some historical feuding that goes down. It hasn't elaborated yet in any of the blog information why the salamanders and the Zakali were butting heads. I mean, the salamanders aren't really a magic heavy race, and we know Zakalis hate magic, but the salamanders, they use magic. I mean, there's definitely mage priests and so forth.
They definitely do.
Yeah, but they're not like heavy on it. That their whole race is based around it. So it's interesting to see what the feud is. I think it's tying into a lot of the sailing Armada stuff, because in the Armada they do. There's a salamander who said Sakali as the last words before they died. So it sounds like maybe there's some naval kind of history there, which is why they've been historically disagreed. But we don't know. And I think that's feels like one, the point to introduce the first lore characters of the Zicali, but also hint towards that feud a little bit more, that Salamander Zicali feud of what's that all about, because even after the story and what we know so far, it isn't 100% clear what's that all about. Is it just a case of they just like British and French that just feuding, or like they've been feuding for so long that they just don't like each other, or was there some kind of event, something that happened in the history that triggered this feud? Which I'm hoping it's more the latter, just so it's a little bit more interesting in terms of what happened there. But also, it could tie into how this is all going to conclude. Of maybe there is something there that the salamanders play a huge part in. So anyway,
well,
that's my interpretation.
They're definitely playing a part, Absolutely.
Yeah.
So and seeing it all exciting. Spread out on the map shows you how big these claws are.
Correct.
I mean, they have penetrated a long way, and they're definitely dispersed. It's amazing that logistically the Zerkali can supply these, invasional attacks.
Yeah.
So
well, they've been planning it for years, and from the sounds of it, it was that Harpy mountain, was the Harpy's rift that exploded and sent that huge beam to the sky, which is kind of like a bug to a flame kind of deal. That they saw that and went, all right, we don't like magic. We don't like magic being abused or used. That's bad. We're going to have to go over there. But we know already, because there is some historical ties about their diplomatic ties. I think Twilight Kin, is mentioned in the 2024 Clash of Kings book of those diplomatic ties. They know of at least the power and the force that it is in the West from them, that is West for them. They know what's happening over there. So they know that they're going to have a pretty strong force in order to get over there. They probably don't know too much about the feuding. They know where probably the abyss is. They probably will have knowledge of the abyss and realizing if they are going over there so close to the abyss to go to Harpy's Mountain or whatever, Harpy's Rift, they're going to have to fight the abyss. So they're going to have a lot of magic as well. And it's kind of implied that the four that were two is a Celestian or maybe a merged Celestian. So they might have a bit of knowledge about that force that's happening over on that side. So I've got a feeling they have been planning this for years and went, all right, if we're going to go over there, if we're going to rein in all this magic, if we are essentially going to be the magic police, we have to nullify all these armies at once. We can't just let one go. We can't just let one go. We can't just let the Basileans or the dwarfs off, because they will rally together like they did for the Edge of the Abyss. We've seen the Vargar and the forces of good rally together and fight back. If we give them the opportunity, they will fight back against us. So my interpretation is they're trying to hit everything at once to shock them, a shock and awe kind of campaign, hit them so hard that they don't have the time to rally together, especially how historically a lot of these factions have teamed together. So I've got a feeling that's why they're doing it in the way they are. Yeah, but that's my guess based off all the history, and I don't have any inside knowledge of what the story has got planned. I may talk to a lot of them, but a lot of them are indeed a lot of people involved. A lot of them are indeed NDA'd that they can't tell me anything. So these are all my guesses based off of the history that we've got so far and how everything is going at the moment. So I don't know. Does that all make sense, Mark? I ramble a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, it's a literally a short story. So
yeah, it's a very short story, and I made a lot more out of it.
Story. So
yeah,
very good. Well, kind of folks just kind of putting a bow on the package here. You got 5 good stories to go and read, and you got more that are getting published, and so it's very, very cool. And in my opinion, a nice way to get us, ramping up towards 4th edition, and again, when you read these, kind of just think, what's the point?
Yeah. What's the point? And I think there is a point, and whether it's valid or not, I'm not sure, but I understand why they did it. Like Out of Control with the Ratkin, I get why they did it that way. I think I don't know if it was necessary really, but I love content, so I don't want to say no. If Matt goes, hey, we're going to release this short story, would you want to read it? I would say yes every single time. I'm never going to say no, but after reading it, I'm like, I mean, if that's your point, then say it. I don't know. I don't know. It just felt like a little bit of beating around the bush in some of the stories where they could have just been straight out and said that's what they're going for. And I feel like it broke a little bit of the law, especially with Rage. It felt like it was trying to point out something that kind of went against what we historically knew of that particular faction. But I mean, this is me just being pedantic. It's not me saying it's bad. It's just me going, that it goes against my interpretation. But if that's now the canon interpretation of what that faction is, it is what it is. But I'm hoping there is some plausible explanations behind some of the choices there, which will make sense in hindsight. But
Exactly.
we'll have to see. Yeah.
Well, much
that's
like
about
the
it.
Traveler and the first introduction of the Yon, it made more sense later on. So that's what you're hoping
Correct.
for, is that
Yeah,
you
that's
know
what.
the pieces will fall into place as you keep going on and on and on. So
Exactly. So I guess we'll wrap up the stories there. Now we are planning to do a follow-up episode of covering the other stories. If they don't release another one, we'll still do that follow-up episode. So if you do have any comments to any of the stories that we talked about that's out of control, Rage, the Traveler, Argon's Luck, and Planestalker, leave a comment down below. We'll bring them up. Any questions, or if you do want us to cover other short stories from the Mantic universe, let us know as well, because we're happy. I'm personally happy to go through the Harpy's Rift short stories. There were 5 short stories that were released after Harpy's Rift finished that kind of summarized and closed out the story. I'm more than happy to go through each one of those. Where there's plenty of stories through Shadowed Horizons that we could elaborate on, but also one-off short stories such as the Wing on a Prayer one, which actually introduced King Gronny, which apparently he's in 4th as well. So that might be an interesting story to go through. And what's another short story? There was the short story called, what was it called? Mine's Curse of Silverheart, which was email only short story that was written by Rob. That actually
Rob
talks about.
Berman. No, I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah. It was one I actually had to reach out to him to get, because I've put a copy on the wiki now if anyone wants to read it. And it was actually about the origins of Lethal Silverheart, how she becomes what we know her now as Lethal Voidheart in Champions. And so that's an interesting story to go through, because it's actually her uncle's fault, basically. To sum that up, her uncle did it. So we're more than happy to go through all those stories. If you want to, just leave a comment down below.
Absolutely. And like I said, if you have a different interpretation or something like that, we'd love to hear it. So again, we're happy to discuss. So very good. All right, Dave. Well, hopefully the dear listeners have enjoyed this little deep dive into the first 5 stories of 4th edition. And this is supposed to be very lore heavy edition. So we're very excited. Between Champions and 4th edition, we're going to get lots to read.
Yeah, I'm really excited, and I'm hoping that it may not pay off straight away, but these laying the seeds of the story going forward, people get invested in it, because I honestly think the energy and the effort put into at least the lore side of 4th edition has been fantastic, and it's really great to see so much effort and love put into it. So I hope it continues. Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And until next time, take care.
See ya.